what I've found in my PhD experience so far is that I have more resiliency when things come up. So it's not like my PhD, I've had to troubleshoot things. There's grants that I didn't win. There was a paper that was published in Nature of Neuroscience that was alarmingly similar to mine. Like those things, they hurt and they took time to process, but I was able to. And I was more present and had more capacity to do my work through these tools, which has made me more productive and just enjoy the experience more.
Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, your weekly inspiration for post-PhD career development. With me, David Mendes. Welcome to this new episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Today, here in the studio, I'm super happy to have with me Sylvie Lahaie. Sylvie is a neuroscientist, yoga and meditation teacher, expert in stress management, burnout prevention, and brain rewiring for greater productivity and ease. She is a content creator, educator, and workshop facilitator who helps people experience real and lasting relief from stress. You know you need it. Sylvie leverages her background in neuroscience, her master's, her personal experience with chronic burnout, and over 4 years of teaching yoga and meditation. She's currently pursuing her PhD in neuroscience and teaches yoga in Montreal. Sylvie, welcome to the studio of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Super happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sylvie, we've read here, I've told the audience, master's, now PhD. Also, other words that came out were meditation, burnout, stress. And what I really found interesting when I found out about you and started, watching your content was that not only you were kind of an explorer in that domain of like meditation, breathwork, yoga, etc., but now your science also connects with that. And actually, you're even at home, you're taking kind of a scientific approach to all of that. We're going to talk about all of this, and maybe also, for sure, also how people who are listening can use some of the things you've explored and discovered and practiced to help them deal with these difficulties that come with graduate school, of course. But my first question and my first curiosity is about, what's your journey in science and how you kind of slowly gravitated toward this domain that you're in today, and actually maybe also gives maybe a little bit more of detail on exactly what you're studying today.
Absolutely. So I'll give a kind of summary of my journey so far, and I'm happy to dive in at any point to expand or explore further. But what I will say is that I am a scientist first. So I did my undergrad at Carleton University in Ottawa in neuroscience, which is my hometown. And then I came to McGill to do my master's. And basically, I did my fourth year project. Since you have a very academic following, I will say what my thesis was. It was on astrocytes and depression in a mouse model. And I loved the idea of searching a question, looking for an answer, not knowing exactly what to do next, and basically discovering something new. And so I pursued my master's. It was in neurodevelopment at McGill University. And when I share a little bit about my master's story, I really don't want it to sound like I was extremely well adjusted all throughout my life, and then my master's happened and everything went like kerplat or whatever. Cause that's not true. There were certainly signs throughout, my childhood, adolescence, undergrad, where these symptoms I describe did pop up. But in my master's was truly where it kind of took center stage and really became apparent. Basically, and I don't want to blame my supervisor entirely. There's a lot of things that came into the fold. I had enough supervision where I had a project, and I had skills. And then I was kind of left alone for a while to figure everything out. And through that, I was really fortunate to find something new and exciting and reliable. And we were on the way to writing a paper, which was wonderful. And I know at the master's level is relatively rare because it's not a lot of time. Absolutely. And essentially, I was working extremely hard to the point where it was concerning. So this is where I'd experienced burnout before, but I was experiencing a whole new level at my master's. So I was working in between like 14 to 18 hour days, going home to sleep for a few hours, coming back. At the time, I was drinking lots of coffee, smoking cigarettes, not eating, and, was slowly kind of isolating myself more. Yeah. And some people did come to me during the time being like, this is a bit concerning. And in my mind, I was truly like, but this is for the paper. And this is, once the paper's done, everything's going to be fine, right? Which of course is, as most people know, and I can say being so far away from it now is a dangerous place to be, to have those conditions on your health. And truly, I mean, the motivation in my mind was all for the paper, but there was a deeper root to what the motivation was. Whether it was, wanting to feel like I was smart, right? Or wanting to feel like I would be successful, right? I kind of placed all those conditions on this,
one goal and achievement.
Goal. Exactly. And to the point where my health was compromised, and I did go see additional help. So, I mean, throughout that time, I did have therapy. I did cancel on my therapist quite a few times towards the end.
Yeah.
But I did also seek psychiatric help. So there was medication involved, which was absolutely necessary at the time to help me level out. And basically, I finished my master's. We did end up getting the paper out. The way I left my master's was unfortunately not a happy place.
Even though you had published?
Well, we had almost submitted. It was one of those situations where there was some disagreement as to what caliber of journal the project should go to, which is, a discussion between trainee and supervisor that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, of course.
And essentially I, had graduated, worked for a couple months and said, well, I'm going to leave and go find my next chapter, right? I wanted to study something different. And so I was applying for PhDs, and unfortunately my supervisor was not very happy with that. And we didn't leave on great terms. He, threatened my reference letter at one point, but I will say that with time and lots of work on myself, for the most part, we're in a good place now because I am in a PhD and I did need his reference letter. So, that's
rough. But an interesting thing about what you're saying is that, and we're kind of veering away a little bit from my idea of this conversation, but it's super important, and it's going to connect with what comes next for sure. But for people who are listening, if you're going through something difficult right now, very difficult, and you're isolated because it's easy, it's very easy in this, especially if you're in life sciences, to just because of how things work and the times you need to be at the lab because of your cells, of your mice or whatever, to overexpend your energies like you did, and then throughout a long extent of time, and then you really deplete them and you get into a burnout situation. The other aspect of that I found anyway, so this already puts you in a fragile situation. And then when you're a master student, so not, like you said, not all master students publish. You have a publication, and now the goalpost is just put a little bit further, and you thought I thought I was reaching the goal. It must have been a hit on already what was not working. But the good thing is, for you who's going through something like that, is Sylvie went for help in different forms. Did you use the university services for that? Because I did when I was finishing.
I did. Okay. Yeah, I did. The psychiatric services at McGill on campus were great. And the doctor I was seeing at the time was incredibly helpful. So just in case people are going through this as well. And of course, I also, like I mentioned, right, this burnout story was on blast in my master's, but it certainly wasn't absent throughout my life. And there is mental health in the family. So all of that kind of came together to give me a bipolar type 2 diagnosis, where I was put on mood stabilizers that really helped support me in finishing. But there is, I promise, there is an even better place that I have reached, and really happened at the end of my master's once, I left the lab environment, even though, there's questions about whether the paper would be published or wouldn't be published. Good news, it was submitted. It was published. Yeah.
It's funny because anyway, there's parallels with my story, but my work, which couldn't be published when I finished my PhD because our animal model was imperfect, let's say it like that, was published like 5 or 6 years later. And I got an email from the publisher saying, you were a co-author on the paper. And I was like, totally, it was like 5 years past, 6 years past. So I can totally, I saw your smile of it's published, and I felt that actually.
Amazing.
I shed a little tear of,
I believe it.
because I was totally not expecting it. That's super, super important. So, and the point where I was getting to is Sylvie clearly today is able to look back at that, which at the time, I'm sure emotionally, you must have felt betrayed in a certain way in this hierarchical relationship with your supervisor of why are you now shifting the goalposts? Also maybe, manipulated, or there's many negative things that you can feel at that time that feel huge. But now a few years later, you can look back and think, okay, that was just an ordeal. It was just, there was negativity around it. But today it didn't stick with me, and I'm where I wanted to be. And I think that's an important thing. If you're going through something very difficult, often when you're in the eye of the storm, it looks like there's, it's even, it can look life threatening and lead to mental health issues. So go seek help. And I'd say surround yourself with people who kind of champion you, who kind of are cheerleaders of you. And I wonder whether you have something to say about that. What made it possible for you to be in the situation of, okay, I'm an underling. I'm being told I haven't done enough, but I need to move on to another chapter. It's easy to, if you're stuck in this kind of hierarchical way of thinking, to say, okay, I've just failed, and kind of not do the steps to then find the PhD, etc. How did you navigate that? And how important was it to have people around you that kind of were not your PI and helped you see another tomorrow?
Yeah.
My God, I'm very poetic.
You are. This is great. Maybe I'll get you to write my book, like that chapter. I'll get you to use all these words. I love it. Yeah. What I will say was I was extremely fortunate to have loved ones, even though I was isolating myself, checking in throughout, even though they're like, I know we're inviting you out. We know you're not going to come, but we're going to keep asking. And it's then good friends, very good friends. I'm very, very fortunate. And, my partner at the time as well was not in the country. He was out of the country. He was starting his postdoc somewhere else. And, he too was concerned, even just kind of virtually, he could tell. And he was also a great mirror in that. I did have people in the lab that were very helpful, and people who were also grad students that were very helpful. Ultimately, I knew I had to do the decision that was best for me, and in a way, call my supervisors bluff, or basically come to an acceptance of like, you know what, if this never gets published, like, look what's happened to me over this last year as a result of trying to get to this, And once I left the lab and was doing other things, which we can get into in a bit, he did a few months later say, we'll move forward with it. There was a threat of kind of giving it to somebody else, no guarantee of first author. And, I say it as a threat. It felt like a threat to me, so that's how I'm going to say it.
Yeah, we always tell the story from our
point of view, our perception.
Our perception, yeah.
And honestly, I think the way that it all transpired was perfect because it really helped me see what I was putting in front of myself, like that my health, my well-being, all the things that make me me were more important than this thing that I might not even get, and so that really, it was a great thing to leave. I did discover yoga shortly afterwards, which is where the turning point really came.
Okay, interesting. So it seems to me that ordeal, and I think for all of us that go through graduate school, it's a very long adventure or project or whatever word you can associate to it, and there's a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of energy put into it, a lot of emotional energy also. But I feel that even when it doesn't go as smoothly as like the great stories that we read when we want to go for a PhD, because we see, this person, it went like this, and then they published, and then now they have a Nobel Prize and whatever. Everyone goes through difficulties, and it seems to me that going through that was really kind of a hard, dark moment. But now you can, you have a lot of learning that you've had from that you can, for other smaller challenges. Well, of course, now you're in the PhD, which is kind of in the same vein, but you can use the knowledge you have from then to navigate now, and plus the other things that we're going to talk about, including yoga, that help you now be aware of the importance of your health versus the importance of your project, and not have an imbalance between them. Anyway, it feels... Yeah, I'm curious to see how then you kind of brought these different things, including yoga, into how you navigate life in a more balanced way.
For sure. And I will say, before I dive into the turning point, that my PhD feels so wildly different than my master's. Of course, I mean, it has its challenges. That's why I decided to do a PhD, but wildly different. So once I finished my master's and I was figuring out my next steps, I was applying to different PhD programs. I was applying to jobs. And because of the way that I was conducting myself throughout the end of my master's, I had tons of bruises, right? I was sleep deprived, probably nutrient deficient, and I was always like walking into things. And so I would have bruises and I wouldn't remember where they were from. And I was like, you know what? I'll do yoga, because yoga will help with that like mind-body connection. I'll be more aware of my body. And I did something super simple. I did like a 20-minute video I found on YouTube, Yoga with Adriene, super popular. And I felt for the first time what it was like to be in a parasympathetic state in my body, truly. And I remember, being able, I don't think she has any music in most of her videos, being able to be in silence kind of at the end is Shavasana. I cried a lot my first few sessions of yoga. And shortly after doing a couple, I was like, I need to teach this to people like yesterday. Like, I need to get this out into the world. And I did my yoga teacher training.
Okay.
And so at that time, I had a little stint where I was a barista while I was doing all my applications.
Need to pay the bills somehow. So
need to pay the bills and need to, at least for me, have some structure, have something going on. And my, at the time, there was a PhD program I was interested in, but the project changed quite a bit. At the same time, I had a job offer for a biotech company in Ottawa. So I decided to go with that. Okay. And while I was doing my yoga teacher training, I was working in biotech in Ottawa. It was a oncolytic virus company in early phase clinical trials. The idea came from a lab out of Ottawa U, Dr. John Bell. The company's Turnstone Biologics. They've changed quite a bit since. But when I did my yoga teacher training, that's when I really discovered breathwork and meditation. And that's where I started to develop a really rigorous meditation practice, rigorous not to sound scary, but in the sense that I was doing it every day and it actually started to stick. And I actually started to start feeling really great benefits. And that's where my curious neuroscience brain goes, but why?
Super interesting. What's interesting? So I have different questions. Can you kind of explain to us what being in a parasympathetic state is? Because people listening might not.
Of course.
know.
So I'll tell you the quick kind of neuroscience definition of it, as well as how it feels in my body. It's a bit different for everyone. But we have our autonomic nervous system, which is just, our unconscious processings, right? So we don't need to think about breathing. We don't need to think about digestion. And thank goodness for that. That's where our autonomic nervous system comes in. And it comes in two different modes. We have our parasympathetic state, which is our rest, digest. And then we have our sympathetic, which is our fight, flight, freeze, and they activate different pathways in the brain as well as different nerves that come out of our spinal cord. And so, in my burnout phase, I was hyperactively in my sympathetic state. Like I was constantly stressed. And so that's why I was able to bypass not eating. That's why I was not able to sleep well. That's why, I was taking stimulants all the time to keep me going, essentially.
Nicotine, the coffee.
Yes, absolutely. And in a parasympathetic state, your rest or digest, right? That's where, when I was doing yoga at the time, I felt, probably wasn't all, but it felt like all my muscles in my body could relax. And that I could breathe easier and slower. And honestly, it felt like my mind could just kind of crack open. And that's why a lot of crying was happening in the beginning. And every once in a while, it happens again, depending on what's going on with me. It's this idea of it's safe enough to release, So that's...
It's super interesting because I was using the image of being in the eye of the typhoon or of the storm or whatever, and having this disproportionate feeling of how horrible, how painful, how unfair things may be at a certain moment. And of course, if you're in that mindset, you will be in fight or flight, because you even if it's not intellectually, your body and your nervous system will think this this is a menace to you, to your life, to your survival. We need to be in this eating, leave it for later, you said, right? All of that. And it's interesting that just following a yoga sequence or a yoga routine on YouTube already you felt already that there was something different there, and this kind of gloom and fog was kind of able to dissipate at that, once you did that. But I guess you mentioned routine, or no, you mentioned rigorous, but I'd say also, I guess it's consistent. Consistency exactly. Is another way to say it. It feels to me that there was a difference, because I also, when you were talking, felt that there was a difference between that first kind of breakthrough of just trying something for 2 or 3 times off of YouTube and feeling, oh, there's something here I'm interested in, I'm going to learn how to teach it. But then it feels like getting to the point where you now had this rigorous, consistent practice, that you also felt another level, another kind of breakthrough. And I wonder if you can explain a little bit what that is, and whether that means also that it's the effects of this consistent practice are accompany you day to day more than just punctually trying it at the beginning. Anyway, I kind of want to feel what the difference is between when you just tried and then when you actually became a yogi, let's say, or yogini.
Yeah, of course. So, what's cool about just trying it, and with yoga, right, you're combining a lot of things, right? You're combining your movement, you're combining your breath with your movement, and the meditation kind of all in one package. And it feels more accessible that way, I find, than when you're just sitting and meditating. And so I was able to experience relief right away. But in the beginning, I would experience relief on my yoga mat, go out into the world, not have this relief, and then would have to come back to my yoga mat to have this relief. And the first thing that I started to notice in having a consistent meditation practice was I was starting to bring the relief with me throughout my day. And the big thing for me that I was struggling with at the time, I would say, was related to around not taking things personally or feeling criticized or feeling overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. So connecting to that idea you said at the beginning of wanting to feel that, to prove yourself that you're smart, there's a connection there with that. So anything that would attack that got you in that, in that state.
Yeah. And you described the being in the sympathetic response really well, because it gets turned on when we feel threatened, right? It gets turned on when things feel urgent. And so I was having a consistent meditation practice, and I was just listening to guided meditations, like 5-10 minutes a day. And I was starting to notice when a reaction was about to start. And I was like, what is that? What is this? Right? Because I wouldn't know. And even like, let's say you burn out at the end and you kind of look back and gain some clarity. Sometimes there wasn't even that much clarity at the end of my burnout. So I was starting to get clarity before things kind of played all the way to the end. That was a big thing that I noticed. And then as I built off of my meditation practice, that became greater and greater.
So let's say if anger in the past used to come in a flash, now you were able to see it come and do, is that what you mean? And do something before it came, or anger or negative self-thoughts or whatever?
Negative self-talk, criticism, shame, guilt. There was...
So you're getting a distance from them.
Getting a distance.
Not that they didn't come, but there's a distance. And what did that allow for you to do? Yeah, it
allowed me. No, it's a great question. It allowed me to respond in the moment and not react, which was great for my relationships with others, as well as the relationship with myself. And it also bought me time to unpack it. Like I said, I was doing therapy throughout that time, and therapy itself was very beneficial, but it really wasn't beneficial outside of therapy, I have to say, in the beginning. Like, I would go to therapy, we would unpack things, it'd make sense. It felt great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then once you're back in nature with things happening and people, and it would not reflect, it would not echo directly.
No, and it's because I couldn't use those tools while I felt like I was under attack.
Oh, okay.
And so the meditations, they helped me in the moment respond and not react, but then it also kind of held me over so I could go home, unpack it with the tools that I learned with my therapist in a way that was actually meaningful and would make meaningful change long term. Because the more you do that, the circuits that you're stimulating, right, are strengthening every time. So it's one of those things that my meditation practice over the years just continues to build off of itself. And I certainly still have moments where I feel threatened or things feel urgent, but the turnaround time it takes for me to get through it is much, much shorter. Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting because you've used a kind of a pair of words that I'd like to, anyway, I wasn't expecting that pair, which is respond versus react. At first they might seem to be almost the same. Can you share what the difference is? Because anyway, I have an idea, but I'd really like to have your take on it, and thinking of the people listening and maybe giving an example how this is what reacting looks like to X situation, and this is what responding look like.
Absolutely. So, a reaction. And when I think of our sympathetic response, in particular, our fast sympathetic response, it basically is using like your brain stem and then the nerves, which means that all of your other brain regions, like your frontal lobe, your hippocampus, right? So things with learning memory, things with executive function, they're gone. They're not being used, right? So that's where things like logic and trying to unpack things when you're in that state,
nothing. Okay.
It's not gonna move the needle for you. And so when things would happen like that, and I could feel my body start to bubble up, right? So maybe I'm getting hotter, maybe my hands are getting sweaty. maybe there's loud, intrusive thoughts, then the words that are coming out of my mouth are coming from a place of hurt or needing to protect myself or, that kind of thing.
I suppose that's the thing about having a studio sometimes we need to wait for this. That's super interesting. And I think it's super important because it's funny because it relates to my, and now we're off, but it relates to my meditation practice, which I have. Anyway. I'm going to clap to know when this is. So I started taking ADHD medication not so long ago after my youngest one was diagnosed, and then my eldest one was also diagnosed, and then I thought, maybe all these things in the past, and then I got diagnosed. And since I've started, I haven't been able to wake up at the time that I was to do my meditation. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Maybe you have some advice for me. But yeah, that kind of, I'm going to say it anyway. The way I describe this idea of kind of the reaction, it's zero time, right? And then when you meditate, anyway, my experience with it, and it was with breathwork, is that the distance starts to grow where you have like 1 second where you can decide whether you let the emotion come or not, then 2, then 10, then 20. And I've called the image, you've watched The Matrix, I guess.
I have, yeah.
You know the concept of bullet time?
You're going to have to refresh me.
It's okay. Do you remember that scene when Neo is fighting one of the agents, and he shoots the agents, and the agent kind of does this kind of very fast movements and dodges all the bullets, and then he shoots Neo, and Neo does this kind of thing where he dodges the bullets, and everyone's like, what? Okay, for him it's kind of natural, but people looking probably saw the same that we saw the agent do. And then you see the bullets go very slowly, and you see the waves of air compression behind I don't know if you remember this image. Anyway, if you go back and see, and the concept that the director named that idea of slowing time very much, and even seeing the bullets go slowly is bullet time. And when I felt that for the first time, I told my partner, it's like if I'm in bullet times. All of a sudden, something that was like immediate and powerful, a bit anger or whatever, now it's like I can dodge it. Anyway, maybe we can put this part in the interview, but I find it really interesting that you had the same kind of experience that I've had through your yoga. So there must be something common, even physiological, that allows us, or and you've mentioned it. It's being in a mode of fighting for your life, where you forget about anything that's not. That's not necessary to let you escape from this very bad situation. So like eating whatever. But the other one, so why does being in the parasympathetic mode allow you to have this kind of superpower of not stretching time per se, but psychologically have more time to decide, is this an emotion that's helpful, or is this just a pattern from, that I actually want to work on, and I'm going to breathe it out and let it go? I don't know if this is a question or not, what I just said, but I wonder whether whether there's something else that you've studied, or in what you've studied that can explain why does it feel like we're switching the speed at which things are happening, although we're actually physically not, but psychologically, yes. Yeah.
No, that's a great question. A few things come to mind. So the parasympathetic circuit itself, right? We're not under any threat is the assumption our brain has, right? We're able to digest our food. We're able to breathe. And through breath work and meditation, I'll pay close attention to in a second. But with breath work in particular, you're strengthening that circuit. And the more we strengthen it, the easier it is to fire. So it's almost like you're creating a new baseline for yourself. You're creating somewhere you can go back to. I like to think of it as like this peaceful parasympathetic palace you have within yourself that, of course, stress happens in life and it's important. I mean, cortisol rises when we get out of bed. It helps us stay alert. It helps us focus and do things. Exactly. But you have somewhere to go back to. And since you're practicing it, your brain is primed to be there for you, right? And that's where it's a bit of a fallacy of, I'll be less stressed out when I'm done something, right? Like, haven't you ever studied so hard for an exam? You finish the exam and you don't really feel relief. You just kind of crash. You have at no point used your parasympathetic circuit. So why would it be ready for you when you're done just kind of like, spending all your energy in your sympathetic state? And so this response, you're not in a threatening state, so you have more space. I also think with meditation, and there's been lots of studies on this, depending on the type of meditation you do, it's basically brain food. You're basically asking your brain to have different brain wave frequencies in different areas. And again, you're practicing that circuit every day. You're like, okay, I'm going to decrease, let's say, my default mode network, which is a series of structures involved in thought rumination, thoughts around self, storytelling, not always the best storytelling. And so if you're actively every morning turning that system down, then once you walk around in real life and things happen, your brain knows, but like, I know how to turn this down and I'm going to do it right now, because why not?
And because you mentioned breathwork, it's something you're already doing. You just need to focus in a specific way to bring you to that state. That's really interesting, and it totally makes sense. So far, we haven't talked about meditation. We haven't dived into meditation yet, and because also meditation is something that may scare some people or be foreign or whatever, or menacing in some way. We'll go into there and you'll see that it's not. But sure, we just mentioned breathing and using breathing to get you into the space of there's no menace. There's I can rest, and my nervous system can be in a state where it's kind of regenerating or recharging, but at least not spending energy uselessly against, what Don Quixote was fighting windmills, right? He was seeing the windmills, they were giants. I guess not. It was if he had breathed, maybe he would have seen the windmills instead of the giants. It just came to me, this example. But what's incredibly important for me in this conversation is that once you get into a master's, once you get into a PhD, you're given this objective, which is to reach scientific excellence. And this means that you're starting this long marathon of surpassing yourself in a way, because you're doing something that you haven't usually, well, some people do multiple PhDs, but you haven't done before. Also finding something scientifically that hasn't been found before too. So there's a lot of reasons to be in the sympathetic mode.
Absolutely.
Just because of what adventure you launched yourself into. But from what I understand and from my experience, our bodies and our systems, nervous systems, are not made to be like that 24/7. My question to you, is it something we forget? Is it something we as babies, infants, kids know? And then, being socialized, going to school, we kind of forget how to be in the parasympathetic mode?
Such a good question. And there's so many ways to unpack that. But the thing that's coming through to me today is, the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic, we always have, right? It's, as babies, we have it, excuse me. And, as our nervous system is wiring, right, through development, we have many more connections, more cells, I believe, as well, that get basically pruned throughout life. Yeah. And one kind of simplified way that it, gets pruned throughout life. Pruned being that, synaptic connections go away so that other circuits can become stronger, is through experience. And we all have varying experiences growing up. And so, childhood adversity, right? There's the adverse childhood experiences scores. The ACE scores have a big part in that. That includes your experience in school. That includes your experience around the world. And then, of course, even your parents' experiences, right? Because there's epigenetic factors, which are just basically tags that make DNA more open or less open. So you're more prone, even before experiencing life, to maybe have a sympathetic system that's more active. And what I will say is that I think that, and I do see this starting to change. I wonder if you see it too, that our society does reward sympathetic a lot more, right? When you see people, working hard, having lots of money, super outwardly successful, valuing things that are outside of themselves, and not so much things that are more intrinsic, or celebrating the moments where you celebrate, or where you relax, or where you slow down a bit. But I do see that starting to shift a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's a part of it.
That's interesting. Okay, so genetic, epigenetic, I guess also family, like whatever, because you said like the adverse event, the adverse things that can happen during childhood, but then also when you get into school, etc. But yeah, I think there's been a whole generation of where the A-type person was the thing, and I do think things are changing. And one of the signals is breathwork is something you start listening. It's a term that 5 years ago I didn't hear much talk about it, and now you do. And you're listening to podcasts I'm listening to podcasts today even, who are usually with like businessmen, whatever. And today it was this monk, and they were talking about breathwork in a kind of a business, something, anyway, in a setting that usually I hear about either business or something very out there in the world. And there's something changing in the zeitgeist. So let's hope that it's something that keeps growing, because it's not something you need to buy. It's not a drug you need to take. We're talking about breathing and being conscious of that breathing. And anyway, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that now that we're going into meditation. But I do think things are changing, and I hope the next generation, and especially graduate students, my audience, go through the least possible feelings of fight or flight during your graduate school experience. It's already very difficult. And, like you were mentioning, even when you finish your paper, you send it, and then there's revisions, and then, so yeah, it's unfair to, above all that, also be dealing with these types of hardships and difficult and negative feelings. So let's maybe take a step further into, because anyway, or maybe we can start with breathwork and what it is. The things that I've seen and done usually is to breathe and be conscious of the air going in, going out, and also, of course, being in a setting that's kind of peaceful, etc., etc. But how does that then how does that become meditation, or how does yoga become meditation, or is just yoga meditation when you do it? That's something that's you were talking, and I was thinking these are kind of sounds like ingredients that are there when you're doing, for example, yoga. As you're doing it, what's your experience, or what's your take on it?
I'm gonna take a sip, and then I'll get into that.
Too. Is it a good question, or do you want to?
No, it's a great question. No, it's a really good question.
Because people often they'll think, meditation, I need to go into a Zen dojo and like sit cross-legged with my back really straight, and then someone's hitting me in the back, like a sensei, whatever. And this is not exactly what we're talking about. It's much simpler than that. It is. In a way.
It is. And it's interesting because I think out of all the things you listed, right, like yoga, breathwork, meditation, for when I, talk to like a person on the street, for example, yoga, I would say, would be the most accessible. It's what we see most. It's, and people can get behind, oh, I need increased mobility and stretching, right?
Of course.
But the practice of yoga, when we look at the ancient roots of Panjali in India, yoga is actually, I like that you said ingredients, is made up of 8 ingredients, the practice of yoga. So you have your yamas and niyamas, and these are kind of rules of how you live your life with others and how you live your life with yourself. So there's principles like ahimsa, which is nonviolence, which is where the vegetarianism comes from. Then you have your asana, which is your postures. Those are your movements. You have your pranayama, which is energy, life force. And this is where the breath work falls in. You have then another 2 ingredients. And then you get to your dhyana practice, which is your meditation practice. And those other 2 ingredients are actually sensory withdrawal and focus. And then the very last step is your samahati. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Samadhi, there it is, which is the idea of universal oneness and being connected to everything, yet nothing at the same time. Very impossible to truly define. And that's the kind of objective of meditation, but you can see how you kind of need all the components to get there. And what I will say between the breath work and meditation is what I find in my personal day-to-day is that I lean on breath work heavily when I'm quite stressed. And it's something that, because I know what tools will get me to my parasympathetic state, I'm either going and finding a quiet corner to do it myself, or the breath work is so subtle that I can do it while somebody's talking. Like if I'm in a heated conversation with my partner, I'll do it. And it was funny when I was meeting his mom for the first time. We were walking from the train, and it was still pretty early on in dating. And he was like, "Are you breathing funny?" And I was like, "Leave me alone. I'm trying to calm down." And I'm happy to share that one. Yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm just like, let me get in my zone, man. Come on. And then I use my meditation for everyday practice, and there it's depends on the goal I have. So for example, in the beginning, and I can talk a bit about meditation and what practices look like and kind of best practices for meditation. But in the beginning, it was to be less reactive in the world. Another one was to access more subconscious states. So there was kind of old, beliefs I had that were still sticking around that weren't serving me. So I was doing kind of what they call a deep state meditation. Meditations to help with mood, right? So loving kindness, where you're kind of embodying feelings that you want. And then there's kind of the visualization manifestation meditations, which is where you're visualizing your goal, essentially. So all of them kind of take on different flavors and direct your brain in different ways. And even just knowing what your meditation goal is can really help you figure out what practice to explore.
Super interesting. I anyway, not for the interview. I want to hear more about that. But these different things, because it's not something I've heard about. Although, just people who are listening probably have heard about manifestations. It's another thing that you're hearing a lot about, and it's interesting that you bring it up in connection to yoga and the eight limbs of yoga. I think is another way that you hear about it. For people listening, also curious, I love languages. Okay, and dhyana. So Sylvie mentioned dhyana. In Chinese, it gave Chan, and in Japanese, it became Zen. So meditation, Zen. This is all connected, but it doesn't mean that you need to go face a wall and be, hit on your back with a stick. It sounds to me like it's, yes, you need to find peace. You can also have these practices for when you're with people, like you said, which is great. And often if you're in the lab, an experiment didn't work for the 4th time, you feel something coming up, you can find a quiet place breathe in, breathe out, whatever. Maybe we're going to have an exercise that we can practice in a few minutes, and then get that little distance. You say, because you said you'd like to be able to distance yourself from some feelings or some emotions. You can do that, and then actually use all of your brain, your capacities to say, okay, this happened. What lesson can I take from it? How can I solve it? So I think it's really interesting, and of course now I see how it all connects, and it does make sense that calming the body would be a first step. So the physical yoga, and then going through those different steps to then get to the ultimate being one.
Exactly.
With everything goal, which I think, a lot of us may, it's a lifetime endeavor.
Absolutely.
But if you do the work, even if you don't get to the 8th step in this life, if you believe in reincarnation, all the other steps are going to help you go through life with so much more peace. We deserve to have our moments and our corner of peace during graduate school and in life in general. But in graduate school, it's very important because that's where you kind of recharge batteries to then come back to the lab and do things again, maybe, or new things that are maybe mysterious, or we anyway. In my case, one of the things that I don't like is the unknown. So whenever it was a new technique or whatever, there was more stress there. So that the thing is, during my PhD, it was before I got into breathwork and meditation. So I cannot travel in time and tell myself to learn it earlier. So, but today I use it.
Yeah. And I will say that, I love that you touched on the unknown, right? Because the unknown can feel quite threatening, and it's very easy to make everything seem urgent, to just remove the feeling of the unknown. Exactly. I mean, our brains are super predictive, right? Like we like patterns, we like, routines, some more than others. And
predictability.
Absolutely. And what I've found in my PhD experience so far is that I have more resiliency when things come up. So it's not like my PhD, I've had to troubleshoot things. There's grants that I didn't win. There was a paper that was published in Nature of Neuroscience that was alarmingly similar to mine. Like those things, they hurt and they took time to process, but I was able to. And I was more present and had more capacity to do my work through these tools, which has made me more productive and just enjoy the experience more. So, there are times where I go to the labs on the weekends, but not often. There, are times where I get nervous to give presentations, but, I enjoy the experience so much more now. And I make it mean so much less about me as a human, right? It's just things that I'm experiencing. And I've been extremely fortunate. Like I've gone to Italy and given a talk. I went to Japan and gave a talk. And yes, it's in part of the lab. Yes, it's in part of my project, but it's also me and how I'm showing up in those areas.
Yeah. No, it's super interesting. And we grow up, we get into school, we follow our academic journey. And I think we fall into this pattern of everything is a pass or fail. And like you said, no, everything is an experience. Some things are pass or fail for sure, because that's how they're set up. But, I remember also like giving like the talks at the MNI in front of people from all the labs that I didn't even know, in PIs and whatever. There was nothing as threatening as that. My throat would go like, and I was like, I couldn't. For the first few seconds, it's like the air wasn't coming out of my throat. But a lot of it was in because of this image that I was building for myself in my mind of something that was not really real. and we were all there to learn, and there's no ridicule and there's no bad questions, etc., etc. I can say that now looking back, but back then it was like very, very difficult. Now, we've talked about a lot of things. Before we maybe go and try to learn something from you that we can use back at home for one of these moments of, let's say, okay, I'm presenting tomorrow. I've prepared, but I'm feeling anxious. Maybe something like that. Some simple exercise that we can use. So we've mentioned the nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Often when I see things about breath work, and maybe I'm wrong and you'll tell me, but the vagus nerve is referred a lot. And that's an anatomical, it's a nerve that we have that runs through, I don't even know anatomically where it's located, but is that related? So when we're breathing, does that, does that have an effect on that nerve? And does that then signal to the parasympathetic system to activate?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, the vagus nerve, it was quite popular when I was starting yoga, and then it kind of dipped. And now it's getting more popular because you can buy things to stimulate it externally. But you don't need to. Save your money.
Yeah.
Keep it in your pocket. We're going to be fine.
Okay, you can stimulate it. Okay.
Yeah, but I believe it's the 10th cranial nerve. So it's nerves, cranial nerves just kind of come out of your base, the base of your brain, your brainstem. Mm-hmm. And it travels down your larynx and pharynx. So it kind of innervates all the muscles here, and then it goes down to your lungs and then all the way through to your stomach. And it's primarily sensory. So it's like 90% sensory, which just means that it's kind of tuning into all of like your stomach, your lungs, your muscles here, and then sending it up to the brain of how they're doing. And so there is a type of breath work. It's actually yogic breath, Ujjayi pranayam, that focuses on constricting these muscles as you breathe. And the idea here is that you're stimulating that nerve and sending it up to your brain. And you're doing it at a pace that is telling your brain that you're in a safe parasympathetic state. And that's where the magic happens. And when it comes to breath work, I'm trying to think. Off the top of my head, I think I know 8 different types. Actually, maybe even more, maybe 10. And there's like slight variations to all of it. But Ujjayi breathing is, I would say, the one that probably stimulates that vagus nerve the most. Okay. Yeah.
So it's part of the. So not all yoga or not all breath work stimulates it, but it's part of the system, and it sends signals back. Okay, perfect. It was just a curiosity because you still, lately I've seen it come up a lot.
Yeah, no, me too. And the device. So actually, I guess interestingly enough, it's been shown in clinical trials to help with certain cases of depression. Typically and I don't remember the word now, but there's a form of depression where it's almost like, and this is not to take away from the disorder at all, depression light, like where the symptoms aren't so severe, but they tend to be medication resistant. Mm-hmm. They actually have like a pacemaker, but for their vagus nerve. I believe it's internal, but they do sell external ones now. And I've never tried it. And I don't see why you would need to when you can just do it yourself. Yeah.
Funny because it makes me think of something someone told me about. And again, this may not go into the interview, but have you heard about EMDR stimulation?
I've actually done
related?
It.
Okay.
So EMDR,
it's this thing about your gaze looking horizontally to different points. And anyway, the person who told me actually said it used to be done like visually, and then you'd move your eyes, and this was to treat depression. And now the person actually had this kind of it was a sensory thing, but they have these buttons or whatever that just go pop, 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 and then it allows them to get to that, anyway, to lower their symptoms.
Yeah. So I did EMDR for a bit, and I did find it really helpful. Mm-hmm. I think it was so helpful for me because I have such a strong meditation practice, honestly. But
and you were able to get deep into the exercise.
And so and I haven't looked up recent literature on this, but the actual neural mechanism hasn't quite been teased out with EMDR. Okay. But the idea is that, you're visually looking at 2 points and your eye tracking. So that's where the EM is eye movement, rapid eye movement therapy. You can also have these little, I don't even know what to call them. Like they're little pads almost. Yeah, they're buzzers. Perfect. Yeah. And they'll vibrate as well as have light.
That's it.
And
that's what the person.
The idea is, I imagine, this is my hypothesis, is that with the eye movement on top with the sensory, right, you're giving your brain other information so that the therapist can then pull out memories from your subconscious without your frontal areas getting in the way. And that, the rewiring process or the process of changing it can be really impactful. One, if you believe that it's going to be impactful, having a belief is really helpful for these things to work. And you're changing it at that subconscious level. And meditations, there are meditations that help you get to those more subconscious states where you're kind of like lowering your brain waves. You're getting in more of a flow state, which is your theta wave, which is right above your sleep wave, which is your delta. Yeah. It's a very interesting therapy. It's worked well. From reports that I've seen, it's worked well for people with complex PTSD in particular.
Yeah. That was the conversation I was mentioning was in that area, in that domain, in that ballpark. Okay. Very good. So enough with my curiosity. But anyway, clearly there's similarities there, or there's a connection. Now, we've been talking for a while. Was there something from your journey that we haven't talked about and that's important before we share a little? So first, anyway, I'm going to just tell you what's going to happen. In the end, I'm going to ask you to share how people can find out about you when you watch platforms, and then after that, I'll tease it before. We'll do a small exercise of maybe breath work. I don't know if a few minutes is enough for for just instructions, or if a short guided meditation is possible or not. Maybe it's too short. But before that, is there anything that we didn't cover that you think would be important? We covered a lot, and then you shared.
We did.
You shared thank you for sharing all you have, because it's really important.
My pleasure. Something that we didn't chat about, but I think would be something for another episode would be the neurofeedback. So the at-home EEGs and meditation. But I think, everything feels good so far.
Yeah.
And I believe having a few minutes, I can share 2 different types of kind of breathing exercises.
Cool. With instructions.
Perfect. And then we can do it 3 times together.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll keep that in mind. So we've covered a lot of ground. You've shared a lot. Thank you so much for so openly sharing, things about your experience going through graduate school, etc. It's not always easy. The good thing is that, like you mentioned, you've had time to reflect upon things, see them a different way, probably also because of all the practice that you've had of yoga, and then in the things that come with, so the meditation, etc. Which I've had the same experience. I after having done some meditation and meditation, like with some specific objectives, I've also been able to look back and talk and share about things that were really difficult, but in more peace, and I felt it. So it's anyway, it's really cool to hear that, and it's cool to share that with you who are watching, who are listening, because it means that you can also, for things that are difficult in your past, be it more closer or further back, you can transmute some things by doing some inner work, let's say. At the end of the episode, before we say goodbye, Sylvie is going to share a couple of techniques that you can use for yourself whenever you want. It's not complicated. You don't need to buy anything. It's all within you. And I think, take note or actually try with us, because we're going to try it here. I'm going to follow her instructions. But before that, if the person who's listening, watching, has this conversation resonated with them, maybe they're going through something similar than you were when you were going through graduate to your masters, or also they're in the discovery of yoga or meditation, etc., and they want to ask you questions or learn more about you. Where can they find you? What's the best way to find your content? And if they want to ask a question, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Amazing. So the best way to reach out to me would be through Instagram, probably. So I share a lot of my work on synaptic.sylvie. I'm also on TikTok as well. So please don't be shy to send me a DM with any of what has been shared and more. I'm also in Montreal, right? So I do teach at a yoga studio called Akasha near the Atwater Market. So you can practice with me in person, but I do share a lot virtually as well. And, sometimes it helps to have someone who's been there and understands and can, it even helps sometimes to have a stranger kind of be presented with whatever you're going through to give you a completely objective perspective. And I'm completely open to that. That just lights me up inside when that happens. So it would be my pleasure.
Yeah.
Those would be the best places to reach me, I would say.
Perfect. So don't hesitate. And even if it's just to thank her for whatever you have taken home from this conversation. I confirm there's a lot of, she does a lot of great content on Instagram, including, and this, we didn't mention it during our conversation, at home experimenting with different, how do you go? Devices?
Yeah, devices.
Stimulation,
yeah.
Or
it's at home EEG devices.
At home EEG devices, where
so
she's really going into the kind of her persona of an explorator of the inner workings of her own meditation practice, etc. It's really cool, and don't hesitate to follow her there. So now. Thank you also for having been with us throughout the interview, but also to kind of close this interview with something you can take home and use forever and share with people around you who might benefit from it. Sylvie is going to teach us two breathing techniques. Are they both breathwork?
They're both breathwork related. The second one will have a little bit of movement, but nothing crazy.
Okay,
it'll be good.
Good. So I know you're gonna probably want me to have my back straight, so I'm gonna sit at the edge of my chair. Good. And I'm the one who's here, so you can look at the camera with the audience, but I'll try and follow your guidance.
Yeah, that sounds good. So the first one that we're going to do together is called the physiological sigh, and this was actually lumped into a study that Dr. Andrew Huberman did. And it was throughout the pandemic. Participants were asked to do either box breath, mindfulness meditation, something else, and then a physiological sigh. And they found in terms of mood improvement and heart rate variability, which is a measure of stress, that it improved it quite a bit.
Okay.
And so what we'll do is we're going to inhale twice through our nose and then a long exhale out the mouth. So I'll do one as an example, and then I'll guide us through 3 cycles together. So I would inhale 1, right away inhale 2, exhale out the mouth. So we're going to do it together.
Okay.
I'm going to inhale 1, inhale 2, exhale out the mouth, smooth and steady. Good. Inhale 1, inhale 2, exhale out the mouth. Inhale 1, inhale 2, exhale out the mouth. Last one for bonus. Inhale 1, inhale 2, exhale out the mouth. Very good. Yeah, so that's the physiological sigh.
Funny, when I exhale, it feels like there's some warmth. Anyway, it's probably some of what you explained physiologically that's happening, but it is peace-inducing.
It is, and I have a guided recording that I share often for free. So if anybody at home would rather have me guide it through in an audio, I'm happy to send that your way. And typically, I'll do maybe that 3, 4, 5 times, and then I'll return to the normal breath for a little bit, and then I'll bring it up again and return to the normal breath.
Before we go to the second one, how do people DM you on Instagram to ask for that?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah. DM is perfect. Sometimes I link it with certain posts and it'll automatically send it.
Okay.
But I honestly don't remember which post.
All right. Okay, good.
So DM is perfect.
And the second one?
The second one is called a compassion hold. And it does also include breath work, but it includes some other basically stimulations and like sensory withdrawal. And so we'll just do this together as I guide it. We're going to warm our hands together. And sometimes what's a nice visual with this is to add a color kind of in the palms of your hands so you can see it and kind of feel it growing as you're bringing it through. And then the compassion hold is you're going to place this on different parts of your body. And so there's 3, I believe, that are typically done. So the first one could be to cover your eyes like that. The second one could be your forehead and the back of your neck. And then the last one could be the back of your neck to your chest. So whatever feels most comfortable. And then what you're going to do on the inhale is you're going to focus on the sensation of your hands. So you're going to listen to that buzzing and humming. If you have that color, it's going to get, more bright. And then on the exhale, slow and steady, you're going to allow that color to dim, or that vibration and warmth to dim. So on the inhale, that color brightens. Exhale, nice and slow, it begins to become more subtle. So we'll do this for another 3 cycles of breath. But this is really great for sensory deprivation, for one, right? Your eyes are closed. You're also redirecting stimulation through the color, through creating heat in your hands. And there's a really nice kind of pressure point with all the different holds that's really soothing for your nervous system. So we'll do 1 more cycle of breath here. And then on the exhale, we'll release. We'll bring our hands back down. Very good. You like that one, huh?
Yeah.
I can see it on your face. I love it. That's the best part with these tools is that when I guide it with people, either my meditation classes or yoga classes or special workshops I give, I can see people's shoulders drop and their faces change. And it's not in me to record them while they're doing it because I think it's too vulnerable of a situation, but I'm like, I want you to see what I'm seeing.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I now have 2 new techniques that I can use and teach my kids.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And my partner, very good. It really feels really good. It feels like now we could like dim down the lights and just like chill, but that's not what we're going to do. Sylvie, this has been great. I'm really, really grateful from all that you've shared, not only your knowledge of these things of meditation, and not just knowledge that you've accrued by reading or getting the knowledge, but by practicing. And I'm especially grateful from sharing the story of how you got interested in these things, how it helped you at these different moments of your life, and how it keeps helping you today. And what I think is interesting, and I hope people are taking home with them, is that none of this is complicated, and so they tend to be things that you can bring with you, like tools that you can bring with you throughout life, and that can keep helping you, because life has ups and downs. At the moments where it gets more difficult, you're not at the mercy of the storm. You can kind of bring things down, get that bullet time, get that distance, and decide how you react to things. And I think this agency that often, when, like we mentioned at the beginning, we're in this position of, with like in very old terms, I'm a disciple to this master, and there's this hierarchy I need to respect, etc., etc. We often forget that we have agency at every moment of our life, and that we need to all the time. We need to put our mental health, our physical health first before any projects or achievements that may be on our plate. Because without the first ones, then we're not going to get the other ones. We're not going to reach our goals, or we're going to pay, we're going to pay a lot for getting them done, and then we're going to have to build ourselves from the ground. And I don't want that for any of you. So thank you so much for having been here in person at the studio. It's been really great. And I'm also grateful for having been able to also kind of breathe a little bit at the end.
Yeah. And I also want to thank you for inviting me on and for creating such a incredible space and platform, and also saying that, these conversations are important because it shows you deeply care about your audience and their well-being.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this new episode of Season 6 of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Have a question about this interview? Want to leave a comment about the podcast? Have someone you want to recommend to be interviewed? Go to speakpipe.com/papaphd and leave me a voice note. Just hit the big record button and leave me an up to 90-second message. I listen to all my messages and I consider all of them for feature on future episodes. speakpipe.com/papaphd. Hope to hear from you soon.